Welcome to Rethinking Youth Ministry, where each week we hope to raise the bar for youth ministry by asking questions, interviewing thinkers, and having real, honest conversations about what it looks like to lead the next generation. I'm Sarah, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Charlie.
Hi, friends.
Crystal.
Hey there.
And Chef.
Hey, everybody.
And today on Rethinking Youth Ministry, we're going to discuss the question, how do we set healthy boundaries in youth ministry? And I think everybody here has had some professional youth ministry experience and probably has had some stories of having done this well and maybe not so well. So I would love to hear some of you guys talk about your experiences in this.
I thought we should have added a laugh track when you said healthy boundaries in student ministry.
I know. I was like, some of you have done this well, and some of you have had dumpster fires of boundaries.
So that would mean you guys have not done a great job. Yes?
Accurate.
Okay.
100%.
Who wants to go first?
Any stories, Charlie?
Yeah. I was serving in the local church in student ministry, had been there 10 plus years. And at the end of the day on our big worship night, would have to be pushed to my car by my assistant in my office chair because I literally couldn't walk.
Wow.
And I just wasn't listening to my body. And why? Because it all had to be done, right?
Right.
And I'm working for God and I'm working for the church and everything is so important. And I ended up in the hospital with an 18 millimeter kidney stone. So apparently that bad boy had been roasting for a while. And so I was in the hospital for a week and then still left with some attachments that kept me out of work for pretty much an entire season.
Wow. I did not know any of this.
It was crazy.
That is
wild.
crazy.
And I feel like if I would have just slowed down enough to hear the hurt a little bit more and not got to the point of pushing myself in my office chair. Needed some boundaries for sure.
But I think what you said about the fact that it's ministry and you're doing it for God, I feel like that is the major tension point, that this work feels bigger than any other kind of work.
Right. And
eternal
it's so
destinies are on the line if I don't do this.
Well, it's purpose,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we love purpose. I have friends all the time. They're jealous of my job, even though they make, I don't know, several times more than I do as a youth pastor, but they're jealous of the purpose. And it is a great part, but it's also a dangerous part. In fact, I think, one of the things that frustrates me about the American church, and this is probably true internationally, is like we leverage that purpose sometimes unethically, I feel like, because you find someone who's high on responsibility, super excited, you under-resource them, and then and so I understand how it gets there, but it frustrates me to sit and talk with coaches, to talk with these youth pastors as we get to go around the country at Orange Tour or wherever it is, and they're just done and they're tired. In one hand, you feel responsible for everything.
Sure.
And I think at the end of the day, and this might be something we need to end with, but at the end of the day, saying no is a faith issue. Like, we have to trust the fact that we're not the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit's in charge of this, and that we're part of a kid's story and not necessarily the answer to a kid. But in the midst of it,
It's
feel
so hard to
the weight,
do
don't
that.
you? Yeah.
It's always someone's senior year.
Right.
You can't let the program die because it's always someone's senior year. Some kids' parents are always going through a divorce.
Yeah.
It's going to be just a season until it's your whole life. It's
Right.
just a season of sprinting. Charlie, I thought it was interesting that you brought up your health because that's always been an indicator for me. I am very fortunate to be blessed with a body that only gets sick when it has time to. I don't know how that's real.
Well, that's fascinating.
That is interesting.
It is. I think I just run on adrenaline until I don't. But I noticed maybe a few years into teaching, I was volunteering at the local church about 40 hours a week and teaching 40 hours a week. And I had been sick 5 Christmases in a row. And I'm not talking Christmas Day. I'm talking the full 2-week break, hospitalized.
Wow.
I was sick for 5 Christmases in a row. And it was just wearing myself out during the whole semester until I collapsed at the end. And as I bring that up, there's a certain sense of conviction. And I feel like we need to say to the listeners, we don't all have this figured out.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Because I am
Far
right
from
now
it.
thinking about the fact that I have been sick the last 2 vacations we've been on.
Yeah.
I've spent 4 days in other countries laying in a hotel room sick. So we're all still trying to figure this out. But I think our health is sometimes the first thing to go.
No, I think you joked about run on adrenaline the whole time, but that's really what you're doing.
Oh, for
Your
sure.
body's running at an emergency. Your body's built to run it. It's not built to run an emergency all the time,
Right.
but that's how we run. And so when it's not an emergency, that's exactly what happens. It goes into repair mode. And but long term, it is not good for you.
Yeah.
You're like mentally, spiritually, like. I have the conversation a lot. I'm going to get super preachy on this one, guys. I'm sorry.
Bring it.
But, you
Jeff.
know, like I devoted the second half of my career to helping youth pastors, and I think this is top 3 thing. Like, this is it. Like, you feel responsible for everything, and you have to give up something. And you will give up something one of these days if you don't address it.
Yep.
It will either be taken from you or you can give it away.
Yeah.
So, you know, what is it?
What do you guys find in the people you talk to or coach or, you know, conversations with youth pastors? This is something that they struggle with personally, or is it a top-down leadership issue as well? Like the encouragement from senior leadership to like, you have to do all these events, you have to do, and so they don't feel the freedom to say no.
I mean, people will do that
Yeah.
as long as you allow them
Yeah,
to
that's
do
a
that.
good point.
I don't think that's a top-down senior pastor issue. I think that's any industry, any organization.
Yeah.
As long as you're able to take on more,
Right.
you will be asked.
You're giving
to
them
take
permission
on
to ask you to do
more.
And if you're talented and you get things done,
You're high
you will
responsibility.
be asked to
Right.
take on more and all those sorts of things. So in some ways, it's a good sign. But I think it is a church culture thing. It is something that people value. It is something that people celebrate. How hard people work
Yeah.
all the
Yes.
time. But at the end of the day, it's just not. It's not realistic.
Yeah.
It's and it's tough and it's fun to get more and to be asked for more if you're leading.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, to be recognized as someone who can get stuff done. Super fun. But
For sure.
like you said, I am terrible at this. I'm in a season. I feel like I'm in a pendulum where
Right.
for about a quarter, 2 or 3 months of the year, I swing over to like, I'm really taking care of myself. And then and then I keep saying yes to good things.
Right.
And
Well,
they're
isn't that
all
the
good
problem?
things.
They're good things. There's
And they
nothing
feel
that-
like they're have tos.
Yeah.
And then I find myself for a quarter of the year where I am right now, to be quite honest, like I have too much to do. And
Yeah.
this will not, I cannot maintain. I made a comment yesterday. I was like, if I try to maintain this in a year or 2, you'll find me in rehab. I know my, and I came out of my mouth without thinking. And then I thought, well, it's true.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if I'm not taking care of myself, if I'm not protecting my faith, my sanity, my spiritual health, my physical health, my emotional health, that's where you. Nobody ends up in rehab on purpose. Like that's
Right.
That's how it goes. So.
Yeah.
Hey, you said something so interesting, and I don't want to pass by it because
Yeah.
I've thought about this a number of times, protecting my faith. There
Yeah.
is something
That's
so
good.
dangerous, I think, about your job and your faith being connected.
Yeah.
And as leaders who are in that world, and we're in that world, and you're in that world, I think we have to be very careful that some things attached to our faith are just ours. That not everything related to our spirituality is also connected to our professional world,
such a
because
Yeah.
that can get super messy, and it may very well be your personal faith that's on the line.
Right.
That was something I had to sort out coming from public schools
That's hard,
into ministry.
yeah.
Of like, my faith was never on the line in public schools because it wasn't a visible part of my job
Yeah.
that anyone would ever comment on. You
Yeah.
know, that's something I've been learning.
So how did it affect you, Charlie, in that season? How did it affect your family when you felt like you did not have
That I
the
worked
boundaries?
for God so much that I was never with God.
Yeah.
Right? And those moments and the busyness really compromised my heart. I don't really remember 3rd grade. My daughter's
Yeah.
3rd grade year is really a blur for me because I feel like that's when ministry was growing. And I know that just being so busy all the time really was affecting my spirit and my heart. And a lot of stepping out of the local church has been rebuilding my inner core and my relationship with
Yeah.
God. Because before, every time I was reading the Bible, it was for a sermon.
Right.
It was to write something.
Yep.
Right.
And now I'm just so cautious of time with God, not just for Him. It's
good.
hard.
Yeah.
It's hard as a mom to say, hey
Yeah.
guys, don't even remember 3rd grade. Good times.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That
Yeah.
is so hard.
Yeah. So it seems like your physical health can suffer, your emotional health, your faith, your family.
Absolutely.
I also feel like there's probably some pressure on single youth pastors to not have great personal boundaries because they don't necessarily have the family at home to go back to, or the kids or the wife or the husband.
Well, and I think, I hate saying it, but I think the church sometimes takes advantage of that. I've seen that a lot. Well, they don't have to rush home to a spouse or kids, so they can just stay and work X number more hours.
Oh, that's not even implied. I've heard that overtly said a number of times. Oh, you don't have a child to go pick up, or you don't have anybody waiting on you at home. You can stay later. You can stay until the last parent picks up the last child, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, this is an interesting one because I also, on the other hand, as I've managed young leaders who, like, they'll read the book Choosing to Cheat, or it's renamed something else now, I can't remember, where, you know, you basically choose to cheat on one thing or the other, and choose to cheat on work is the general idea. But, you know, they're 25 years old and they're like, well, got to go home. I'm like, what are you, like, I believe in a season where you work hard.
Right.
But it's not about the hours spent as much as if you look back at your week, did you take care of yourself?
Right.
Were there times where I love what you said, where I was with God, you know, or I separated working for God and being with God? I think that's great. Am I taking care of myself physically? Am I, do I have community, and have I surrounded myself some way with people who love what I love and do what I do, which is one reason we do this podcast.
Right.
Because so many of you out there, and you are working hard and you are under-resourced, overworked, and you're the only one in your church who does what you do. So, we're just excited to be in your car with you right now. So hope this helps.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that it really is a spectrum. You've got like the overworked, and then you've got the using it as an excuse as well.
There's excuse, and I know you hate to say it, but I think someone's got to, like, we as the church are running some of our most talented folks into the ground, and they're overworked and underutilized, and we're not developing leaders because of the stuff that's going on. So, anyway, I told you I was going to get preachy. I'm sorry.
It's good.
Still sitting with the phrase overworked and underutilized.
I know.
Wow, that's good.
So you guys have shared some great stories, Crystal in the hospital and Charlie in the chair being pushed out to her car. But what are some of the symptoms people should be looking for before it gets to this critical moment where you're in the hospital?
I mean, I think there's a lot of them, right? For me, the telltale signal is when I get really short with people in conversations, and I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to be efficient.
Yeah.
Because there's no time, but it sounds like I'm a jerk. You can always tell the shorter my conversation, probably the more stressed or the more overworked or the worse I've been at keeping some boundaries and making space.
I have a friend who, in my men's group, and he will kind of, call us out on it. And the term he uses, he goes, "So you're leaking oil." And he would say something like that, like something's up.
Sounds gross. What
like
does
the
that
engines, it means the engine's running.
Yep.
The engine's running fine. The car's working. But if you took time to look back, there are, there's oil on the floor, and there's something coming that, you can fix it now for $100, or you can wait and have the new car thing. You know what I mean? So you've got to take care of it. And so he's always like, being short with people's one. I would just get frustrated with people. Like, I find myself just like, everybody's wrong,
Right.
And as my Aunt Mark would say, when everybody's wrong but you, look at you.
Yeah.
So that's a good one.
I think that's also important who you're short with, because I think with student ministry or youth ministry, you are having relationships with these students, and so you're pouring into them, but then you're short with your personal friends or your family. That's like you're invested in these relationships. So it doesn't necessarily look like task oriented. You're still investing in people.
Well, this is a good point with the family thing, though, because when you have a job like ours that's so full of purpose, it is the people closest to you that pay the bills for your overwork. Yep. And we've just got to be careful with it. So looking at your calendar and seeing where you spent your time, I think, is something, I thought to myself last night, you know what? I'm an hour's worth of sleep and a 20-minute review of my notes on a daily basis away from being a kick butt leader. It was kind of like this. I thought to myself, like, I've been working at this for 45 years and I still can't, get on top of it. But if I can get some more sleep, so sleep might be like,
that's
how much sleep are you getting?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, the research coming out on sleep right now is nuts how important it is. And then,
crazy?
I just feel like I just take notes and I never go back and look at them.
Yeah.
And so, like, if I just go back and make sure, if I'm writing down ideas, I need to review it at some point. So anyway, that was a random thought. But it was something that came across my mind yesterday.
That's good.
As I was going to the next meeting.
Right.
So,
Okay, so short with people, that's a good kind of indicator. What else would you guys say?
Well, I'm an 8 on the Enneagram,
Okay.
so I'm a really great driver and can do a lot of things. But I notice for me, when I start dropping things, and that's not a habit for me, and I notice that something didn't get completed or done, that's a sure sign that I'm leaking oil,
Interesting.
right?
Okay.
You're right.
Because I'm like, I'm not something that doesn't complete things.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then if the 15th thing drops, then I'm like, ooh, I'm so scattered, I can't
Yeah.
keep it all together at this point.
Okay. So that feels like you need to have a self-awareness
Ooh.
of who you are and what that looks like for you, because it'll
I
be
think
different.
all good leaders need to be pretty self-aware of what that looks like for
Yeah.
them and their down moments and those times when they're like, oh, that's the time I need to put on the brakes.
Right. That's good.
It's also pretty noticeable for me when I start skipping out on the boundaries that I've already set or the rules that I already have in place for myself. Like when I notice I haven't exercised in 2 weeks, I've started eating nothing but Cheetos and watching nothing but Real Housewives. I might be in a bad place, you guys. Or
No judgment here.
if I find myself working on the weekends, which for us a weekend is a traditional Saturday, Sunday. We try not to do a whole lot. There's nothing wrong with a season of that, but if it becomes a habit,
Right.
then I've broken my own rule and that's become a new rule of this is the new way we do things, and then that's a problem.
It also seems like you would need to be willing to listen to what other people speaking into your life. So even if you can't see the signs, to be able to listen to other people who see the signs in you and
And not get
adjust
mad at
accordingly.
them.
Yeah, yeah, right. Be open enough to hear it.
Well, when you've washed the same load of towels 3 and 4 times and your husband goes, is everything going okay with you? Because I've noticed.
because it hasn't gotten out of the dry, out of
Yeah.
wash, and then he's washed
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to think
That
about
is a
it.
good one.
Yeah.
Or when people make just casual comments that are almost compliments, like, wow, you work a lot, or, oh, you are always at work these days. It must be a busy season. I'm like, no, it's a busy life.
Right.
You know, another way they
good.
say it is, I know you're busy, but,
Yeah.
you know,
yeah.
and I don't want to bother you, but like, listen to those things. When people are saying that all the time, it's like, that's interesting.
So we've talked a lot about the problems that come with burnout, the symptoms of it, what it looks like. So what can we start recommending people to do and recommend to ourselves to do to prevent this from happening?
I have a lot of great ideas
There's so many.
because I tried to implement them in my life.
Yeah.
So please know I'm not saying this because I'm great at it. I'm saying that I've tried these things and I feel like here are some things that have
Yeah.
worked for me. Especially in student ministry, I like to use the word Sabbath. So I Sabbath on Fridays. So that means moms cannot burn up my phone because Johnny's having issues.
Right.
I didn't answer your email because I'm Sabbathing. And I feel like using that word, people respect it, then it's my
Okay,
day off.
interesting. Right.
And it had a little more leverage to it.
Okay.
And I'm going to be really honest with you. I started doing silence, days of silence. It really started with 30 minutes because I broke out in hives because I don't do silence well. So
Baby steps.
I'm like,
baby
that
minutes
sounds
is good.
great.
yeah, baby steps. I think in student ministry, we're so busy.
Yeah.
We don't ever have time to be silent. And I feel like sometimes when we're silent, it's scary because there's some ugly truths that can bubble to the surface when you're truly quiet and you're with God. And we would just rather go and help a student or
Right.
sit with a family than to deal with some of our own crud. And so I started a habit of silence and just kind of being in those moments. And that's not easy.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at it. I still work at it. I even have a guide. I'm such an 8. I have an outline of like how to
Yeah.
do everything. But I ran away from silence because it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But in those moments, I could begin to heal a little bit from the hurt
Yeah.
from church and work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
I mean, I have a whole list of things that I've been working on and
Yeah.
not doing perfectly. I don't know where we even start with the list. One of them is, for me, one of my Sabbath days is Saturday. And so the cell phone, as much as I can, gets locked away and left at home, which, believe it or not, you can go out to dinner, you can go hang out with friends and not have your phone with you. And I don't have the self-control to not answer the text. I wish I did.
So you just leave it.
I don't
get it
have
away.
the self-control to not think about the email
Yeah.
notification I got, even if I'm not answering it.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about it. and I'm not wherever I should be. And so I've been trying to just lock the
That's
phone away.
good.
Do you know Amazon sells a cell phone jail?
That's
You
amazing.
see that?
Yeah, you might need that.
You have to have a lockbox for it.
That you lock it and it's like timer or
Yep,
something? Like
it
it's
is.
not going to let you get to it?
Not gonna let you get to
That's-
it.
It's brilliant. The glove box in my car works too. Like,
You don't
that
actually
works.
need the...
I don't
lock.
actually
But
need the
somebody's
lock.
making a
It's-
lot of money on that idea.
Yeah. It's
brilliant.
Yeah.
It's super smart. If I had teenage kids, for sure,
Right. Cell
I would
phone
get them
jail.
a cell phone lockbox because it is addicting.
Yeah.
And super unhealthy. Something else I learned a few years ago, just based on reading a random article on the internet, which is where you should get all your life advice,
Google's machine.
is there was a study that people who enjoyed their lives the most made the most of their weekends. And one of the ways that they did that was by planning an event at the latest possible time in the weekend. So for me now, that would be Sunday night. If you're in youth ministry, Sunday's a work day, probably. So maybe that's Saturday night. But the reason was we all tend to go to work mentally whenever we're halfway through the day. Whatever the last event was
Right.
on, for me, Sundays, I would go to work after lunch on Sundays. And so
Yeah.
we started planning for people to come over and have dinner with us and play board games on Sunday nights. And it was so helpful that it ended up lasting for about 3 years. It got to like 16 people were coming to my house.
Right.
And then it just got crazy and became stressful. So we stopped doing it. But it was so helpful to plan something and
Yeah.
to say, hey, that part of my weekend is
It's
off
still the
limits.
weekend.
That's
Yeah.
such a good
I'm not going to
idea.
have
That is a
half
good
of a
idea.
weekend. So Sunday nights were powerful. The other thing that's been really helpful for me is I get up really early on Monday mornings and spend some time planning the week, making a checklist, looking at my schedule.
Yeah.
And when I don't do that, it's not because I'm getting an extra hour of sleep and I'm somehow more helpful for not doing that. It's actually when I am the least in control is when I'm not doing that. And so to have control of my week, I just try to get up early on Monday morning and spend time working on that.
Yeah. That's
I think
good.
that's awesome. I was listening to you. I am good at not answering texts, as you guys know, who work with me.
Well, now
if
that
at
you bring it up.
Well, it's such a
is
text
an
culture.
intervention.
I've had to try to get used to
Yeah.
this because my brain does not do many things at once. And so what I've learned about myself is I have to turn off all my notifications. Like I have an Apple Watch right now that does nothing that it can do because I've turned everything off on it because I couldn't stand it would vibrate and tell me to breathe. I'm like, shut up. Like I was thinking about something. And so I've learned I keep my phone on the nighttime setting.
Oh, yeah. Like airplane
Like during
mode.
the
Yeah, I do
day.
that.
Yeah.
Because I will read my text when I want to read my text, not, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good at it. And again, I completely understand if I know that text is there, I have to read it thing, which is why I've had to, and I've had a few years more practice than you have. So turning off notifications is really important, I think, so I can try to be present and focus during the, doing the things I'm going to do. And I look at people who I think are super effective and they seem to be able to do 6 or 7 things at once. But I also sometimes wonder, I wonder if that's actually going to work long term.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the older I get, the more I've realized, when we saw a young couple and they had all the nice cars in this house, we would say, how do they do that? Or I saw, they seem to have, we would say, well, how do they do that? And what we've found out over the years is after many divorces and many,
Right.
it's like they weren't, and
Yeah.
financial situations, and they weren't doing it, and they were doing what many of you are doing right now, which is running yourself into the ground because everything's important and everything's an emergency. And the reality is, again, I'm going to come back to it. It's a faith issue. I remember one of my favorite talks by Doug Fields. He was talking about he had set aside an evening with Kathy, his wife, and they were gonna have dinner. And just as he was sitting down, there was a knock at the door, and some kid's like, "Doug, I need to talk to you." And he looked at him and said, "Are you going to kill yourself before tomorrow morning?" And he said, "No." He said, and he slammed the door. And as it was closing, he said, "Call me in the morning."
That's amazing.
That is awesome.
That's the difference between we see all of it as emergency, but the
Yeah.
reality
Right.
is we can really it's just not. It's
Yeah.
just not. And usually time fixes things
Yeah.
and
Yes.
before we even jump into it. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting thing. And one thing I do, I'm terrible with my days, but I'm much better with my long-term plans. So calendar-wise, Like I set vacations and I stick to them. I know when I need vacations. I need a vacation in late February, just something about not enough daylight. I think,
Yeah.
what do they call that? I think
Seasonal
affective disorder, SAD. And I think that's a real thing. It is for me at least. And so I needed something to look forward to, much like your weekend. I need it more like I can get through these next 2 weeks of these things to do, knowing that's coming. Something to look forward to, something to plan. So that's always something. And I'm pretty good at like the rhythm of meetings and stuff like that. And planning out long term. It's during the day that I tend to fill all those little 20 and 40 minute spots, which are for rest and catch up and maybe just go sit in my car, whatever it's going to take.
I love that. The difference between the calendar and the clock.
Yeah.
That paying attention to both to be healthy.
I love that I'm not the only one who hides in my car when I need a minute.
That is the truth. I love getting work done in my car.
I'll go drive. I'll do a lap, I mean, it's just, I'll turn the radio off and it'll be quiet.
Yeah.
And so
that sounds
I used to listen to talk radio. This is another idea that you might have, just because I love thinking about and wrestling with ideas.
Yeah.
But that's not silence and that's not rest. And so I had to learn to I don't listen to talk radio anymore. In the car, I either listen to just, good music or a lot of times it's nothing, which allows me time to, and it's amazing what bubbles up, isn't it?
No, it is. And it's amazing how hard it is that you're like, how uncomfortable to sit without anything on the radio.
Right.
And if we don't make space for it to bubble up during the day, I don't know if this is true for you, it bubbles up when I'm laying in bed at night.
Yes.
When I have to be quiet, then I'm thinking through all the things that I probably could have thought through on the drive home.
Yeah. So I think all these things so far work in the professional world as well. But is there anything specific to ministry that any tips when it comes to preventing burnout that would be ministry specific that you guys would recommend?
I really worked on my prayer life because I found that my prayer life was always focused on other people. And I was always praying for someone else, another situation. And I wasn't connecting to God through my prayer life. And so I just kind of started being more legit about what's going on with me in my prayer life and kind of turning that over to God, which everyone probably says that they do already. But really the majority of my prayer life was for other people.
And that's interesting because that feels more spiritual.
Right.
There's almost something attached like, oh, I'm so focused on other people, I don't need to pay attention to me. When in fact, when you're not taking care of yourself, you're not helping other people either.
I think somewhere along the line in ministry, though, we start ignoring the stuff that makes our chest tight and our eyes well up a little bit because we're so focused on what everyone else and what's hurting them that we forget that we have our own hurts and we're just not turning that over to God.
Right.
But it's true because, her priority is it's more than mine. Like, I'll just take care of myself later.
Yeah.
And that's the leaky oil situation, right?
Yeah.
When everything is about other people, but you're never... Gosh, it's the for God, with God thing again.
Yeah, that's good.
One thing that was really helpful for me is an older leader who had been down the road a lot farther than me said, hey, every time you pick up the phone, you're teaching people when it's okay to call you.
Ooh, that's good.
And we don't keep normal business hours in ministry. And so there's not a sign on the door that says closed. There's no answering service. And I always felt like, well, just this one time. Or I'll pick up because they really need it. And in reality, I was always teaching them, this is a good time to call. This is a good time to call or text or Instagram direct message me, which is kind of where we are now. And I think it's okay to teach kids and parents and coworkers that there are sometimes I'm probably not going to answer.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed that's a little different about ministry than anywhere else is there are very few jobs that are going to require you to work 24 hours a day for 5 days straight.
Oh, my heart.
And we need some time off after camp.
Yeah.
Like, if you're
That's
required
good.
to come on Monday after you've got home from camp Sunday night, there may need to be a conversation there because our bodies can't do that, but my brain can't do that either, especially as an introvert. You guys.
Yeah.
I need some quiet. After that.
That's good.
I mean, I don't know that this is specific to ministry, but maybe it's harder in ministry. Like this whole idea of boundaries means you're saying no to things.
Yep.
And so that's important. One of the things you have to ask yourself is, what have I said no to? And if there's nothing you've said no to, there's a sign that you're on your way
That's a good
to
question.
burnout.
Yeah.
So for instance, like there's, again, I think we hit on it a little bit. There's two things going on here in ministry. Is one, there's this external church culture of busy is good, sacrifice is good, which it is to a certain extent. And, on the other hand, you have this internal thing as well. So I love the fact that you said you might have to go have a conversation with somebody and say, I'm at the end of my rope. And that somebody may not agree with you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you may be in a caustic environment that you need to start to figure out what's the next step. If I'm not going to be allowed to take care of myself here,
Right.
this might be the wrong place. And I know that sucks to hear for some of you because you feel, one, these kids, you know them, you love them, everything else. But you are no use to those kids if you run yourself into the ground at some point. And maybe it'll make a statement. Maybe it won't. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
But there are places who want healthy youth ministers and need healthy youth ministers. I can tell you that. Or youth workers, whatever the better word is for it. On the other hand, you also have to say no to yourself on those things. Like saying no to answering a text is a healthy thing, or this is the time that I'm not. And I feel like those are really important things. And I haven't met a really exceptional leader who has accomplished something exceptional that hasn't had a season where they decided not to do something that they loved.
That's interesting.
In order to focus on this one thing.
Yeah.
But what you can't say no to is taking care of yourself. That's the only thing you can't say no to.
Yeah.
But that's what we do.
Yeah.
Right? When we don't do it on purpose. But I mean, whether it's Andy Stanley giving up his, I still hurt for him. He talks about, the kids came along, I had the church, and I loved music. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to say no to my kids. I wasn't going to say no to the church. And so I sold all my equipment. I was like, oh, that seems aggressive,
Yeah.
But I mean, he knew himself. Like,
Right.
If it's around here, I'm going to, disappear into the basement for 4 hours. And that's going to be my thing. And now I think he's getting back into it. Now the kids are gone and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, it's just like, and so I feel like I'm kind of at that point in my life too.
Yeah.
I think I wrote in my weekly report the other day, I was like, I have got to figure out what I'm not going to do. And I can't think of anything that I don't love that I'm doing right now. I mean, I can think of lots of little things I don't love. Like I could give up expense reports. I could, give up,
Like,
those sorts of
easy.
things, calling back certain people, those sorts of things. But I mean, for the most part, like it's this, like, I can't do all this and I love all this. So what am I not going to do?
Crystal, you said something, you had a mentor, someone older or wiser, who said you're teaching people what time to call you.
That's awesome.
I think that is important to pay attention to people who are further along life stage or professionally or whatever, that are able to look back with the clarity and perspective that you don't have being in the middle of it and listen to those people and speaking into you.
They can tell you where the potholes are in the road.
Yes. Yeah.
I had a senior pastor once, and I was sitting in his office near Collapse, and he's like, "That's really great, Charlie." He goes, "Who made your calendar?" He goes, "Who scheduled all that?" Sheepishly, I did, right? And it's too much, and I can't handle it. But he was right. A lot of times in student ministry, we do write our own calendars. We do put those retreats on the calendar. And a lot of times we just back to back everything, right?
Yeah.
Because all the things are important.
Right. That's good.
Chef, you brought up something, and I don't know that this is something we want to or don't want to talk about, but I thought it was really interesting is when you came on staff here, you asked us to all do a weekly report. And at first I was like, what? But basically it's just, hey, letting your coworkers know what you're doing for the week. And it wasn't a like, I want to check up on you and see if you're actually doing your job. I've come to find that it's really freeing so that everybody around me knows what I'm dealing with. And there is no suspicion of, well, I didn't see you on Tuesday. Well, you can see that I had, these things going on, or I was writing this. And I think for me, when I've gotten really good at communicating what I'm doing, there's less pushback when I say it's too much. There's less pushback horizontally with coworkers. There's less pushback from above when I say, hey, I'm overloaded, and I've communicated and you can see it.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to talk about that.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good point. Most people don't see what we do on a daily basis.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And most people don't understand what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have I heard, so what do you do during the rest of the week?
Right.
You know?
Because
You
you only
just
work
work
on
one
Sunday.
day. One day.
Like, And even adult ministry people who are like, what are you playing games? I'm like, no, I'm on the phone with DFACs. Like,
Right.
when's the last time you were on the phone with DFACs, adult ministry people?
Right.
And DFACs, by the way, is that a state
It's
thing?
it's
the Department of Family and Children, whatever. It's we got to call the state when there's an abuse situation. And, there are complexities to ministry that people just they don't understand. And it's not necessarily our job, but I think, I went to that weekly report, and I think you're right. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it really helps people understand. You're really prepping people for that conversation of, hey, you've asked me to do this thing, and I would love to do this thing, and I'm honored that you would ask to do this thing. But if I do that thing, what's the thing that that you would rather me not do then? And here are the things, and you just lay it out that clear. It's that well thought out. But, and if they say, no, I need you to do all those things, just say, all right, it's good to know. Good data point,
And I've been working on, and this has just been helpful for me, scheduling out not just the things that are meetings that I have to go to with other people, but also the things that nobody sees.
Right.
Like how long it takes to write a sermon.
Yeah.
That goes on the calendar now, so that I know I can't plan other things during the sermon writing time, because that takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
I've found I have to put downtime, or white space is what I call it, on my calendar, or it just gets filled.
That's a good tip. Schedule
So it's
in the day.
It's an event on my calendar to not have an event,
That's good.
So.
For me, it was boundaries for family. My daughter was in kindergarten when I first started in ministry, and I was transitioning out of teaching middle school into working in the church. And of course, it was very time consuming.
Right.
I felt like that 40 hours a week was a joke. It was 60 plus hours a week. But I know for me, I sacrificed a lot of my family time for church. And I think having a boundary saying, no, my daughter's dance recital comes first. And that's when I'm going to attend, versus an admin council meeting, right?
Yeah.
And I think letting your staff know, especially for me, I have personal vocational values, and I have those values set, and I want my job values to align with my personal values. And when I'm looking at a job, my family needs to come first. And a lot of churches would not say, you really need to be at this council meeting versus a dance recital for a kindergartner. But for me, I say families first, right? So it's knowing your personal boundaries, knowing who you are, and then when you're going into the job, saying up front, here's what comes first in my life.
So the Apostle Paul is super interesting here, in that in one hand, he's talking about you shouldn't get married, if you're going to jump into this, which I've heard used like, hey, ministry comes first. And I think people have used it to rationalize not taking care of the family. But Paul also says you should take care of your family, if you have it. And so we find ourselves in this place where you're like, what's your primary calling? Maybe, and so if you found yourself in a place where you're married in ministry, I can say, I think you've been called to ministry. I know you've been called to be a husband or wife.
Right.
If you find yourself in ministry and you've got kids, I think you've been called to ministry. I know you've been called to be a mom or a dad. And so those are, primary important things. And this is a boundary, isn't it? It is. And maybe the weekly report is the time to do this, to say, what are my primary things? What are the things I'm saying no to? And that should fall in line with, what you feel is most important. And if you can't, I feel like the Apostle Paul's saying, we've been called to a season of ministry that is going to be hard, and we're going to pay for it, and don't drag other folks into it as well. That would be irresponsible and not loving.
I think that's where it gets complicated if you're single, because I think there is the expectation on them because you don't have the family. That gets twisted and weird. You don't have to have these boundaries because no one else is suffering, but ultimately you are. So I think that's where the church doesn't always do a great job at protecting the personal health and not just the family health.
That's a great point.
And ultimately, whether you're single or you're married, if you are burning yourself out, you're being irresponsible to whatever you were called to. And one of my favorite leaders says, protect the asset. Because that's what Chef says to us all the time, is protect the asset. And the asset is you. And maybe it's because he wants to call us something that sounds like asset. I don't know.
It's like we pronunciate your words. But I think it's great. But I would also say, if you find yourself as a husband and wife, or a mother or father, and you're balancing all of that, you still have to protect your faith,
right?
And and your health, because that will help you in those primary ways. And I have found personally that it's just the older my kids get, I keep thinking, once they're in school, they'll be less.
Right.
No, it's and it's never going to stop. We're always going to be worried about our kids. It's always, So, I think it's just a matter of priorities, and that's one level of boundaries. What are my primary callings? And if you are single, I don't think it's wrong to have the hope for that other calling. But you should primarily be taking care of yourself in that season. So,
or forever.
Yeah, forever.
I see the same conversation play out all the time with the high schoolers I lead, who are honestly having trouble setting boundaries for themselves when it comes to the amount of work they're doing, the amount of things they're signing up for, the amount of things they're not saying no to, the time crunch. They're sometimes much more stressed out than I am. And one of the things I've been saying to them is a song lyric, because that's how you communicate with high schoolers. And it's, we're caught when our hands are off the wheel, but our foot is on the gas.
Oh,
and I have been listening to that in my own head a lot, saying, like, there's nothing wrong with your foot on the gas. There's nothing wrong with going fast, signing up for a lot of stuff, working hard, accomplishing as much as you can accomplish, but are your hands still on the wheel? Are you still, and I ask myself that a lot lately, like, are you still in control?
Right.
Are you still making the rules for yourself? Are you still allowing other people to follow the rules that you set for yourself? And that's been helpful with 11th graders.
Are you being mastered by your schedule?
Yes.
Yes, mastered by your schedule.
That's good.
That is great.
Well, this has been a super helpful and insightful conversation. I love how honest you guys have been with how you're trying to make this work in your own lives. So to wrap up, I would love if each one of you could just recommend a resource that you found helpful as you've kind of been learning how to practice boundaries in your own life. And then we'll have a link to all these things in the show notes. So Charlie, what would you recommend to student pastors?
Well, a book I've read at least 3 times recently is Present Over Perfect by Shauna Niequist.
Yep.
Very good. Very
Such a good
challenging.
book.
Yes.
Yeah. It's good.
Is
Great.
it to women or is it a general audience?
I would definitely think it's more towards women.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, she's great. I just didn't know if she's writing anyway, I think
But
we
she
could all get
uses
something
this
helpful.
visual instead of, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about her content on.
I think you are.
Well, I don't
Let's
know.
do
Am
it.
I allowed to? There's this visual she uses in the book of what I want is to eat a strawberry, but instead I run to the gas station and I stick my head under the strawberry fruit icing machine and I just let it run. And she was like, that's what I feel like I'm doing with my life. I really want something very real and small, and instead I'm just.
That's a great visual.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. That's
I
really
love
good.
that.
I love that. Chris, what would you recommend?
I'm not going to recommend a resource. I'm going to recommend some homework.
Oh, great.
And it's because it really has been helpful to me. Find a way to communicate to your leadership what you're doing every day.
Okay.
And maybe for you, it's the weekly report. Mine is super simple. It's highs and lows from the last week, my schedule for each day, and the to-do list. And just finding a way to be, when you're honest and open-handed with what you're doing, you're less likely to feel guilty when you say, I really can't do one more thing. So that's my
good.
homework.
I like
Very
it.
helpful. Chef.
I mean, if this is new for you, there's a book called Boundaries, which is, kind of the basic. John Townsend, Henry Cloud wrote it, I don't know, so many years ago. There may even be a Boundaries for Youth Pastors. So, I mean,
There's a Boundaries for everybody,
Boundaries
it
for
seems.
lots of things. So you should check those out. I mean, there's just some great big ideas on how you draw the line between what's your responsibility and what's not. And then I really enjoyed, for the most part, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. Scazzaro, is that his name? Pete?
so, yes.
Pete Scazzaro. It's been out probably for 10 years as well, but it really hits at some of these taking care of yourself realistically stuff. I mean, I think it's a great resource. Some things in it I took and some I didn't, but it really helped me think through some things.
I love that. That's great, guys. Well, that wraps up today's episode on setting boundaries for your student ministry. Thank you so much for joining us for the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love you to subscribe to the podcast through your podcast app and leave us a review. And if you want to learn more about the student curriculum and strategy we're all a part of at Orange, visit our website, rethinkingym.org. Until next time, thanks for listening.